Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. I am, of course, your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and how strange is it? It seems that when I work on a subject for a show, oftentimes it becomes national news. Not that my show becomes national news, but the topic that I bring up very shortly thereafter becomes the water cooler topic of the day. And what I mean is this, not that I spark anything or anything like that. Sometimes it's pure coincidence. And in the case, as you'll hear tomorrow, I haven't even released the show yet, but the day before I release my show on quantum computing, Google makes their announcement of their quantum computing supremacy. So lo and behold, quantum computing becomes the topic du jour of the day before I release my show on quantum computing. And if I'm not making any sense, I've put together this show on quantum computing. I started work on it over a month ago, putting it together with the professor and doctor that you'll hear tomorrow on the big show as I release it on Friday. Kind of demystifying quantum computing, explaining what quantum computing is. The purpose of the show tomorrow, and this is a big plug to have you stay tuned for that. The purpose of the show tomorrow is not to give you this comprehensive knowledge of quantum computing, because that cannot possibly happen within 39 minutes. But it is designed to bring you up to speed, to kind of have an idea about what people are talking about when you see quantum computing in the news. So we go into all that detail on tomorrow's show, and it's really cool. I will include a link in that show to Google's announcement. It's a video that popped up on my news feed, and now all sorts of different tech outlets and science outlets are picking it up. Google has made major strides in quantum computing, and it kind of puts what I have put together into perspective, and it will all make sense tomorrow when I talk to my guest, Professor Jaspal Sublock. It's really an amazing, fascinating show, so make sure you're all tuned into that. I wonder what else I can bring up on the show that, just by my thinking about it, might become national topic the next day or around the same time as I'm thinking about it. And again, I'm not an influencer by any means. I do not have the numbers to be a major influencer on the content creator stage, but it's just funny to me, the coincidence. Okay, so changing subjects. This is the main subject of today's podcast. A couple of years ago or so, the WHO, not the band, but the World Health Organization, listed hazardous gaming and gaming disorder as something that could potentially be a problem, similar to substance abuse or addictive behavior. And that has drawn, naturally, lots of controversy. Lots of people, lots of scientists kind of scratching their heads. Why are you creating a new disorder for gaming disorder? And we'll get into that in a second. But the biggest issue it raised, the biggest question it raised is what the World Health Organization was suggesting was that playing too many video games can have adverse effects on your health. Well, one of the main counter-arguments to that is that gaming, unhealthy gaming, more likely is a symptom of a mental health disorder or other behavioral disorder. That is, gaming doesn't cause the behavioral disorder or the mental disorder, but if you have a mental disorder, if you are prone to addiction, like gambling addiction or any other behavioral addiction, yes, it can manifest itself in the symptom of unhealthy gaming. Gaming isn't the cause. It is argued that it is a symptom. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And because I personally, and I would really like to know what you think about this, and there's any number of ways you can get at me. GeekTherapy@iheartmedia.com. That's the email. I always link it in the description below the podcast, but also on Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook. I really want to know your opinion if you'd be so kind to oblige, and you don't have to, but I'm really fascinated to hear what my listeners think about this. Do you think that playing video games can cause adverse health defects elsewhere in real life, outside of reality? Or do you agree with this? It's not a new counter argument, but it's in the news today. This counter argument that no, heavy gaming is not causing the health disorder, the mental health disorder. It's a mental health disorder or behavioral disorder that sometimes manifests itself as gaming, as unhealthy gaming. I will give you some personal experience. I will come at this topic from my own experiences through life, and I will rewind. I would hop in the DeLorean right now and go back to 2003, shortly after I graduated high school in 2002. In 2003, I moved to California. I moved to Simi Valley to live with my aunt and uncle. And long story short, that's where I went to sound school, recording engineering school, and basically got my educational start there. But when I first moved to California from Texas, I did not know anybody in Simi Valley besides my aunt and uncle, who I love them to death, but they were not my age. I was 19 years old or so at the time. No, I was definitely 18, 19 years old around 2003. I was 19 because I moved before August 2003, and I was born in 1983. So when I moved, I was 19 years old, and I had my first birthday, my 20th birthday, in Simi Valley. Anyways, I vividly remember those first few weeks. I mean, actually, it was weeks when I first moved there. Back home, I was outgoing, and I always had friends around, always something to do. I was always getting into it with my friends, always going out, just having a normal social life. But when I moved to California and didn't know anybody, for weeks, I locked myself, not locked, but I stayed up in my bedroom, and one of my friends had given me their old PlayStation 1, the PS1 Slim version, and I had Gran Turismo 2, the dual disc Gran Turismo 2 for PlayStation 1. And I would play that, honest to God, hand on my heart, for at least 12 hours a day. I would wake up late in the afternoon. Late. I would wake up 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. I would wake up at sunset, and I would play PlayStation. I didn't have access to high-speed internet or anything like that at this house. At best, it was dial-up, and I never went downstairs to use the internet computer. Yes, high-speed internet existed back then in its infant form, but my aunt and uncle certainly didn't have it yet. So anyways, my only form of entertainment was television and video games, and I would play Gran Turismo 2, like I said, honest to God, at least 12 hours a day. From sunset is when I would wake up, and then I would play it until well past sunrise. I might play it till 7 a.m. My aunt and uncle would be getting ready to go to work, and that was my cue to start going to bed. So I missed a lot of life in those first few weeks. But here's the thing. And I was a recluse. I was locked up in my room. Not locked, but I held upstairs. I didn't go downstairs. My aunt and uncle changed the entire flooring of the downstairs, and I had no idea. I just came down one day, and all of a sudden, it was brand new carpet where it was tile. That was not a quiet job. I slept through all of it, and I felt so guilty because I didn't even help with any of that. So when I first came downstairs from my cocoon, they're just like, "Oh, look who decided to show. Are you done hibernating?" That was, for a period of time, that was unhealthy behavior. If it had been an extended period of time, and yes, a few weeks is, roughly an extended period of time, but really that amounts to a brief little patch a brief little patch in my life where I felt very uncomfortable and I didn't know anybody, and I kind of just stayed up in my room. So me playing a lot of video games, that was not the cause. Gran Turismo was not the reason why I never came downstairs. The reason I never came downstairs could be chalked up to maybe some social anxiety or whatever, just being in a strange place without knowing anybody. Just kind of getting acclimated, I guess. I would go out after my aunt and uncle would go to sleep. I'd go to Del Taco at like 4 a.m. and come back home. But anyways, that behavior, playing video games, is not what kept me up in that room. What kept me up in that room was another temporary, I'll just call it a slump. And if that makes sense, and I know perhaps there's those of you listening who have gone through a similar slump in your life, or maybe you're going through a slump now. Maybe you've gone through a recent slump like that. And you know what? Here's the thing. Video games get better and better as far as how close they mimic the sights and sounds of reality. Up to and including, if I may be so bold, sexually. And that's kind of a separate thing, high-speed internet and everything, but games are... Sexy characters in games are nothing new, but all I'm getting at is people now have a digital fix for almost anything in their life. You want sex? Just go on the computer, download some sex. Order some sex things off of freaking Amazon if you want, eBay. That part of the human experience is covered, perhaps not in the healthiest of ways, but you can get that, sorry for the lack of a better word, release digitally. You can escape digitally. That's what video games are. You can escape from whatever life that you are trying to run from. You can escape to it in video games, and now that they look more lifelike than ever, of course people are going to escape to that. You can take out pent-up aggression in video games. You can play violent video games, which in themselves, the jury has been out for decades as to whether or not that's damaging, and really, the jury has ruled it's not. If you are a violent, unhealthy person by nature, yeah, violent video games aren't helping anything, but violent video games aren't causing the violence. To bring up school shootings, those individuals are disturbed heavily from factors in the real world. From bullying, from parents not being there, or bad childhoods, abuse, what have you. That's all stuff that happens in the real world. If they're playing video games, they're locking themselves away in a fantasy world where they don't have to feel that pain, where they can escape from the pain of reality. So it's not the video games causing the health issues. Do you think I'm onto something with that? Do you agree with that counter argument to the WHO's list of new disorders? And that's something I put a pin in the beginning of the podcast. There has been a separate issue, people taking separate issue to the fact that the World Health Organization seems to be just making up disorders at this point. That they have a specific definition for gaming disorder now, by many scientists' accounts and behavioral experts' accounts, is poppycock. It's nonsense. Why are you creating specific disorders? Gaming disorder, quote unquote, falls under the umbrella of addictive behavioral disorder. So gambling, for instance, would be the closest kind of analogy to it. There's a little difference with gambling, of course. People are addicted to the adrenaline rush of the risk, I guess, the endorphin rush of the risk and the potential of winning, and the bait that it presents that maybe next time I'll win. But gaming is very similar. It's a repetitive activity, and there is a reward when you do well. Maybe it's not a financial reward, but the high score goes up, you get ranks and achievements, you level up, you go up through the tiers. Depending on what video game you're playing, you go up through the ranks. That's what the whole loot box controversy was. Is basically falls under gambling. You're paying real money to get perks that aren't real, perks that are just digital, or unfair advantages in a video game. And it's kind of the loot system, DLC, loot boxes, and all that stuff was just taking advantage of people's addictive nature. And we all have the ability to exhibit addictive behavior. There's not a single one of us walking around, not me, not you, not anybody, who doesn't have the potential to fall victim to an addictive behavior. You know, on the show I say we're all geeks about something. I wouldn't go so far as to say that your geek thing is addictive, because there are things I believe that can seem addictive, if this makes sense. For instance, if you're really into electronics and you turn that deep passion, that geek thing, into a career, like my guest next week, not this week, next week, Chris Henderson has of Hendy Amps, he turned his severe geek thing into a business. He built the microphone preamp I'm talking into right now. It is a prototype called Everything, quote unquote. And I'm tinkering with it again, it's just a prototype. There's all sorts of switches and faders and knobs on it and inputs and outputs. And I am just now learning to make it work for me. And if you listen to the next podcast, what have you, next week, it might sound a little different because I'll be tweaking other things on this microphone preamp that Chris Henderson built. But that's what I'm saying. He turned that passion, what others might call an addiction, into something that was beneficial. And in that case, can you call it an addiction if it's just a passion that becomes your business, versus an addiction that has no beneficial outcome? You can play video games in earnest and be working towards becoming an esports athlete, turning your passion for video games into an actual career or something beneficial. But there are those, like anything else, any other behavioral disorder, that can get addicted to video games because of the endorphin rush. They're like any addiction, it's that endorphin rush. So bringing it all back around to the point of this podcast is that counter argument. That is gaming addiction an actual addiction, or is it the symptom of other underlying problems? And actually, in this case I'm bringing up, that is a counter argument to the World Health Organization's new list of gaming disorders. The Oxford Internet Institute published, quote, an open access journal for clinical psychological science. And basically what they did is they took a sample of over 1,000 United Kingdom adolescents and their parents, basically, or their guardians. So over 1,000 adolescents and their guardians and parents. And in the survey, there was about 24 questions, and basically it was things, for instance, and again, like a lot of stuff I read from, this is from Ars Technica, I'll include the link below. Questions are something around the lines of, I feel a sense of choice and freedom in the things I undertake, versus, my daily activities feel like a chain of obligations. Basically, they're gauging each adolescent's level of happiness and control they feel in their lives, and how that correlates to how many video games, how much time they spend playing video games. And what the study found was that out of 1,004 adolescents surveyed, 525, so just over half, played online games for an average of 3 hours a day. 55% showed, quote, at least one of the 9 indicators for internet gaming disorder, and even 23% showed at least 3 indicators, unquote. So the correlation they're trying to make here is, and figure out is, hey, are these adolescents having a hard life? And if they're having a hard life in reality, are they playing more video games? And the study goes on to suggest that no, it's not the video games causing the hard life. It's the hard life causing the video games. And perhaps the best little quote at the end of this article, and I will quote the last little phrase here. The research conclude by asking rhetorically, quote, if the attention the researchers and clinicians, is that the right word? Yeah, clinicians. If the attention that researchers and clinicians give this immensely popular activity is empirically justified, judged on the basis of the evidence reported in the study, we would conclude it is not. Basically, they're saying that the World Health Organization list of gaming disorders is schlock. There's evidence reported in the study that concludes that their hypothesis that gaming or video games cause these negative behavioral effects is bunk. That's just their opinion. That's just what their study is finding. And that is what I tend to agree with. Can I put on my... It's not really a tinfoil hat, and I'll kind of wrap up with this sentiment. It does seem strange. It seems like there is, let's say, an incentive for the World Health Organization to start creating new disorders where there were none before. Does that make sense? If you create an addiction, if you label something as an addiction, now you can be prescribed specific drugs, specific treatments for gaming disorder, when really you don't need a new distinction for gaming disorder. It's just a behavioral addictive disorder like anything else, and treat it the same. But there's more money in creating new disorders. And I don't want to step on any toes here. I don't want to create much controversy here. I'm not trying to make a huge statement with this, but you know, it's said that the number of cases of autism has skyrocketed since the 1990s. And that's something that they say to, I'll just say it, to scare people. And I'm not disputing, I'm not saying that autism diagnoses are fake. I'm saying that the study has gotten better and better. We've gotten better and better at diagnosing. The autism has always been there. It's just we've gotten better at specifying, you know, specific types of autism. There are, and it's kind of funny, not funny, but it's interesting that there have been people that gone through their entire lives having never been diagnosed with autism. But at the same time, just knowing that there's a rise in diagnosed autism, could that have the effect of diagnosing autism where there is no autism? Where it's basically just a lack of discipline or something else. Maybe it's not an actual disease that this person has or dysfunction that this person has. Maybe the parents just weren't effective. Or, not to blame parents, maybe the kids just had something else. Maybe it wasn't autism. I'm just saying, I'm not a doctor. I'm not somebody who diagnoses autism. It is just fascinating that there's a rise in autism, and if we cannot separate the medical industry, pharmaceutical industry, from the fact that they would benefit from diagnosing more symptoms. Not that there aren't more symptoms. I fully believe there are more symptoms, but perhaps, better way to say it is like this. Perhaps 1 out of every 100 diagnoses of autism, in this case, isn't really autism. But it's easier to just go ahead and write it down as a possible cause for this person's behavioral disorder, and let's just go for that. Maybe the danger there is that they're not being treated for the actual symptom that they, or the actual disease or dysfunction or illness that they have. I hope I'm not coming across as too uncaring about this. That's not what I'm getting at. But to tie it all back around to this gaming addiction, when you're trying to distinguish a new illness, a new mental illness, a new dysfunction as, you know, specific gaming addiction, that implies that video games cause the problem. And that sounds like a bunch of fuddy-duddyism to me. You think we would have proven that video games have a negative effect on society by now? Some people argue, well, we have more school shootings because we have more video games. Video games make people violent. No. We've always had guns in this country. Always had guns. We've always had the Second Amendment. We've always had access to guns. Kids used to bring guns to school to go hunting for rabbits after school. They were raised with guns. They were raised to respect weapons. There's something else in society that's happened over the past few decades that correlates to the rise in violence and mass shootings. It's not the guns. The guns have always been there. I'm not making a comment on gun regulation or anything like that. I'm just saying that the rise in gun violence is not because of the guns. It's because of something else. The gun's just sitting there, not doing anything. But there are definitely more broken homes now. There is definitely more mental illness now, rampant. One of the problems is that there's still a stigma, and we are working on it and making great strides. And like I said, I'm not gonna plug it right now, but I have a site that I'll mention at the end of this that I take pledges for people wishing to donate. I'm not trying to make this a plug, but a percentage of it goes to help those with mental illness because it is a problem in our country. One of the problems is we treat mental illness, we still try to bury it. Parents hate each other. Parents go through a nasty divorce and they don't know how to handle it with their kids. So the kid just has this pent up, they don't know what to do with it. They act out on it. Not just divorce, it can be anything, any other dysfunction that's happening in their lives that they perceive from their parents or something that's happening at school. And mental illness is basically swept under the rug. It's like people walking around on a broken leg. Oh, my femur's broken, but let me just try to hide it. It'll heal itself if I just hide it. No, your mind can break like a bone, and you need to heal it like a bone and give it the treatment it deserves like a bone. So it's not video games. It's not the video games. In a way, you could argue that video games are a healthy outlet for pent-up rage and aggression. Oh, this kid shot up the school, man. He was playing all these violent video games. Yeah. You want to talk to the kid's parents, maybe? Want to do a little psychological examination of the kid? I guarantee you'll find issues there that have nothing at all to do with video games. I promise you. Absolutely promise you. Healthy people don't do that. It's people who are hurting. And one of the aims of Geek Therapy Radio, and I'm sorry I got a little testy in this episode, but you know what? It's the podcast. I'm free to do so. One of the aims of Geek Therapy Radio is to encourage everybody that you're not alone, especially if you have some sort of mental illness, whether it's going through just a temporary rough patch or this is an ongoing issue of your life, that you're not alone. In one of the ways I believe, and this is the whole point of Geek Therapy Radio, why I started this all, is to put fascinating subjects in front of people, in front of you, to hopefully give you some inspiration to find a new hobby, a new interest, something to give you hope. Hope. Or healthy distraction, something to put energy into, whereas you would put negative energy into the illness or it would manifest itself in a negative way. As my mind wanders, my wife's going to sleep these days watching Bob Ross. And I can't be in the room while she watches Bob Ross because I'll just wind up watching Bob Ross paint happy trees for an hour. Because it's interesting and it's soothing and his voice is soothing. And I love how he brought the art and inspired people to try it themselves. There are healthy ways, healthy outlets to channel unhealthy energy, if that makes sense. And that's all I'm trying to do here. Maybe tomorrow in the big show, learning about quantum computing might inspire you to, if you're young enough, choose a major that lets you get into pioneering quantum computing. In 2 weeks from now, I have Chris Henderson, as I mentioned, who is an electronics whiz, who builds all sorts of components and studio gear and guitar gear and microphones and everything like that. Maybe that'll inspire you to pick up a soldering iron. You don't have to be perfect with solder. You don't have to be afraid of it either. Not the solder, really. I mean, you'll get burned once and you'll learn just that quickly. Oh, it's hot. Maybe I'll keep my hands away from it. If you get more into electronics, yes, there are capacitors that can kill you, that can discharge through you and give you a good shock, even kill you potentially if you don't know what you're doing. But by the time you get to that point and you're using those types of components, odds are you'll probably have a pretty good idea what you're doing at that point, by that point. But the point is, as you listen to shows on Geek Therapy Radio, who knows what you might land on? Who knows what might spark you? And that's my way of trying to do my part, even in its small, infinitesimal way, at least as of right now, to help ease the burden of mental illness that people may feel, that you may feel, that sometimes I feel, that anybody feels. That you don't have to sit there and think you're all alone in that. Nobody does. Because we're all geeks about something. All of us. Lean into that. Lean into that community. So, anyways, my email is listed below in the description, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. Let me know what you think. Do you have counter arguments to anything I made? Did I get anything wrong? I assume I got some things wrong. But I would love to hear it. It's an open discussion. As always, I want to be accessible to you, the audience, at least through email, at least have communication and dialogue. Because there are a lot of experts out there. When I bring up a topic, I call myself the mental curator because I'm not the expert in any one exhibit. But I can show you around different exhibits, and I want to hear from experts of the exhibit. If we come to an exhibit of cavemen, I want to hear historians. I want to hear their input, as to the evolution of mankind. Scientists, biology, paleontology. I'm neither of those things, but I would love to hear from those experts. That's why I have experts on the show. Experts in quantum computing, experts in electronics. I really like doing this, and I really love that you're listening. I really do love it from the bottom of my heart, and I truly, truly appreciate it. So I'll wrap it up here. We're all geeks about something, so embrace your inner geek. Know from the bottom of my heart that I mean this. Know that you are worthy of love. And just as importantly, if not more so, you're worthy of loving yourself. I know it's a hard road to hoe. That makes more sense. But if you just chip away at it, we can make progress there. Loving ourselves. Just keep chipping away at it, and each day, one day you'll realize, hey, I am not in the funk I was in a year ago. Started to try to respect myself more, embrace my geek thing more, and share my geek thing with others. Share in that community. And the last thing is, be good to yourself and others. And stay tuned for tomorrow's show. It's going to be fun. Quantum computing. It is a blast. Other than that, take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Geek Therapy Radio, Saturday night at 10 on KPRC 950. Or listen anytime on our iHeartRadio app.